How obsessed are you with becoming Europe? There seems to be a giant obsession from our Prime Minister on becoming part of Europe. He wants to drop anything to do with the United States and just be Europe. What if I told you Canada might be drifting, slowly, quietly, away from its most important economic relationship and toward a political and economic experiment that has already failed us once before? Actually, not even once. In fact, it has failed us not even twice before, but it has actually failed us multiple times across our Canadian history. We quickly seem to forget our history, which is why we are doomed to repeat it at times. But this time, it's being driven by a prime minister who has spent more time in Europe himself than building a plan here at home. In just the last 6 months, Mark Carney has visited 11 European countries across 5 trips. 11! That's not diplomacy. That's a nasty little pattern Mark has developed, and perhaps an even nastier obsession. And when you start connecting all the dots, the speeches, the partnerships, the defense agreements, supposedly, MOUs, the economic signals themselves, it starts to look less like a strategy and more like a unhealthy obsession. Let's tap into the truth.
Welcome to Bakes on Things.
Welcome back to Tap the Maple for your Wednesday evening here on the Bakes on Things channel. My name is Chris Baker. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps the channel to progress itself in the algorithm, but also love to hear your conversations down below. None of what we're talking about here is speculation tonight. This isn't conspiracy. This is documented behavior from our own Prime Minister. Mark Carney has addressed the European political community almost as much as he's addressed anyone in our own parliament. He's been invited to speak at the European Parliament himself, signed new EU strategic MOU partnerships, joined the EU's Safe Defence Initiative, and again, this is all within a year of taking office. Now look, here's the thing. I don't want to say that diplomacy doesn't matter. It matters. We would have expected Pierre Elliott to make trips to Europe, although probably not as many as Carney. Diversification also matters, but here's the question. No one in the media seems to be willing to ask this Prime Minister. At what point does diversification become displacement? Because Canada isn't just adding Europe to the quiver, as they say. We may be shifting toward Europe altogether. We may be starting to see that Mark Carney's obsession is becoming slightly unhealthy, Margaret. But here's the thing. Here's where this gets even more dangerous, because this exact idea isn't exactly new. We've tried it before as a country to see if we could mesh with Europe a little bit better than we have before, and each and every time it has failed. You see, there was also Diefenbaker's Britain pivot in the 1950s, for those that might have been around for that, where it was trying to strengthen economic ties with the UK to be more directly related to them. The result didn't meaningfully reduce reliance on the US at all, and never actually took off from there. Then there was Pierre Elliott Trudeau's third option in the 1970s. The goal was to diversify away from the United States. Yet again, trigger was US tariffs during the Nixon era, and the result of the whole thing? Well, it also did not work. It did not replace U.S. trade whatsoever. It did not protect Canada long term whatsoever. In fact, here we sit doing this all over again. But it was not just a liberal thing. Mulroney also tried to pivot from the United States back in the 1980s. Then came reality, though. Brian Mulroney himself moved Canada back toward economic integration with the U.S. Free trade deals were signed, and what happened after that? Well, Canada's GDP increased by $1.1 trillion over that next 25 years. Let that one all sink in with you right now. Every time we tried to move away from the U.S., we actually struggled to do so. It will happen this time as well. Mark Carney is no better than any of those three gentlemen at doing this. Every time we leaned into it, we actually grew when we leaned into the United States growth again. Do you want to know why? Oh, I don't know. Because they're attached to us. They are our literal neighbor. Again, we need to diversify, but replacement is not the answer. And the defenders of this will say, we already trade with Europe, Chris. What are you talking about? And they're right. We do trade with Europe. We do. In fact, here's the thing about our trade with Europe. You see, 98% of Canadian goods already enter the EU tariff-free. Exports to the EU are up 57% since 2015. Trade hit $34 trillion. So here's the obvious question. Was this not then, Justin Trudeau? No, if we already have near free trade, what exactly are we chasing now? Because deeper integration doesn't mean more trade. It means more control. That's what he's chasing. He wants the control. We talked about his arrogance this morning in this morning's episode. This is where that stems into in the 9th degree at this point. This is where things get a lot more serious. To go deeper with Europe or even consider EU-style integration beyond what we do already, Canada would actually need to do a number of different things. First and foremost, we would need to adopt thousands of EU regulations, align with strict environmental mandates over there from their wokeism, accept European agricultural controls, and apply EU tariffs to countries like the United States in order to get ahead there. And that last one, that's the economic landmine we may be just about to step on, because the United States is not just a trading partner of ours, it's our largest trading partner and customer, and it will not change. That is not going to change. Not Europe, not Belgium. It is the US. That is who it is today. That is who our biggest customer will be tomorrow. It's just geography. Get over it. And shifting tariff alignment away from them? Well, that's not diversification. That is a poking stick, a hot poking stick that is economic self-sabotage. That's what that is actually called. So where do we land on this then? Because it does get even worse from here. Closer integration with Europe and Mark Carney's obsession, making that come true, could actually mean opening doors to 450 million EU residents for work, for study, for migration. And that's at a time when Canada is kind of suffering right now, aren't we? We're cutting our immigration targets, I thought. We're facing a housing crisis. We're struggling with job availability for our own citizens. And we're just going to slam open that door and see what happens with people coming in here? Well, this isn't timing. This is contradiction. It's complete contradiction from a policy that was supposed to be in your election platform, Mark. Now, let's be fair. Let's be fair. We got to be fair to Mark because we always get complaints. We're conservative podcasts. We're not being fair. There is possible strategy here. Perhaps we can acknowledge this. Carney could be trying to use Europe as leverage in the CUSMA renegotiations. But given his history, this being a plan B is highly unlikely. And here's the problem. Even if your plan B threatens your plan A, you don't have leverage here. The leverage is actually with the U.S., and we really need to start calling it opportunity rather than leverage. I hate that word. You have risk because the U.S. is watching this closely. They want to see what we're going to do. They want to see what our next steps are, and they're already eyeing Canada's energy and critical minerals, which is an advantage. It is not leverage. It is a negotiating point. It is not leverage. We can't keep calling it that. The exact same resources Europe now wants, so too do the U.S. So what happens when both sides want the same thing? Well, we don't pull it out of the ground. So now what do we do next? Because Mark does not want to approve a pipeline. That's obviously what he said. Even when he says maybe, possibly, it's more likely than not. Like, we know that. That's our parents used to use that on us. That's a no. This is where people start asking deeper questions then. Carney's background, first of all, is in Europe, a lot of it, right? It's Bank of England, it's UN climate envoy, it's deep ties to European leadership circles. So when we see things like frequent EU travel, when we see things like rapid partnership with friends and agreements with allies, policy alignment signals with everybody in the EU, it's pretty fair for us to ask as Canadians, is this about Canada's economic future or Mark Carney's career future? Or is it about aligning Canada with a global economic framework that he already is attached to personally and believes in wholeheartedly? And if that's the case, that could be very dangerous for us. Europe is a long way away. The United States is attached to us. We need to bring this home. Canada's economy runs specifically and mostly on U.S. trade, North American supply chains, and geographic realities we aren't going to be able to change unless you think you can sever us from the U.S. and float us across the Atlantic. You cannot geography your way into Europe. It's not possible. You cannot ship faster across the Atlantic than across a border, and you cannot replace your largest customer with a political idea that you just feel like you want to be European, so let's see if we can make a way for this to happen. Here's the bottom line. Trade diversification is necessary. It's good. I'm not saying it's not. We have it already. We need more of it. Global partnerships, they're absolutely necessary, always. But abandoning economic realities to feed your obsession, your unhealthy obsession with becoming a European, for ideological alignments with things that you wrote in your book or political signaling, that's not leadership at all. That's just trying to make it your way. That's ownership. That's not leadership. That is trying to be the owner of Canada, the king of Canada. It's a gamble. And history has already told us how this gamble ends every single time, my friends. That is how it ends. It ends a disaster, usually economic disaster, that takes a long time to fix. That's how you tap into the truth. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and join this conversation down below. Are you obsessed with becoming part of Europe? I know most liberals think that's a great idea because they want to spurn the United States at all costs. But the reality economically is that we cannot do that. We have no ability to do that. And we've even tried this before 3 times and it did not work. So let me hear what you have to say in the comments. Again, like I said, don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us in the algorithm, grow the channel and the audience, and of course our community down below, which is the most important. We will see you at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, Eastern Daylight Time, for our Thursday morning edition of Tap the Maple. For now, have yourselves a wonderful Wednesday night, and we'll see you tomorrow.